There is a feeling you know well, even if you have never named it. You were fine 10 minutes ago, content even. Then you opened an app, scrolled for 4 minutes, and suddenly your apartment feels smaller. Your car feels embarrassing. Your clothes feel wrong. Your life, which was perfectly acceptable moments ago, now feels like something to apologize for. Nothing changed. You did not lose anything. You did not receive new information about your actual circumstances. You just looked at a screen, and the screen did what it was designed to do. This is not accidental. It is not a side effect. It is the product. The feeling of inadequacy you just experienced is the most valuable thing the modern economy produces, because a person who feels like enough does not buy things they do not need. A person who feels behind, who feels watched, who feels like their current life is quietly embarrassing, that person is a perfect consumer. They are reachable, they are actionable, they are profitable. What is happening to you every single day is not marketing, it is psychological engineering. And until you understand the specific mechanisms they are using, you will keep responding to them the way they designed you to respond. Not because you are weak, because the system is that good. This video is about how it works. Let us start with the foundation. The entire architecture of modern consumer marketing rests on one psychological principle: social comparison. The tendency of human beings to evaluate their own worth not against any absolute standard, but against the people around them. We do not ask whether we have enough, we ask whether we have as much as them, whether our life looks like their life, whether the gap between where we are and where they appear to be is acceptable or shameful. This instinct is not a flaw, it is ancient. For most of human history, knowing your position in the social hierarchy was survival-relevant information. The person who understood where they stood relative to others could navigate cooperation, competition, and threat more effectively. Social comparison was a feature, not a bug. But it was calibrated for a world where your comparison group was maybe 150 people, the village, the tribe, the people you could actually see. Your brain evolved to benchmark itself against a small, local, realistic sample of human lives. What brands did was detonate that calibration entirely. First came advertising, then television, then glossy magazines that brought aspirational lifestyles into ordinary living rooms, then the internet, then social media, then the algorithmic feed, which does not show you an accurate sample of human life. It shows you a curated, optimized, engagement-maximized stream of the most aspirational, most polished, most carefully constructed versions of other people's lives, selected specifically because they generate the emotional response that keeps you scrolling. Your comparison group went from 150 people you actually know to 300 million strangers at their absolute best moments. And your ancient social comparison machinery, which was never designed for this, is running hot trying to process it. The result is a chronic, low-grade sense of inadequacy that has no rational basis and no natural resolution. You cannot close the gap because the gap is infinite. There is always someone with a better kitchen, a newer car, a more impressive vacation. The feed never runs out. The feeling never fully resolves. And that unresolved feeling is exactly what every brand with a product to sell is counting on. Here is the first specific mechanism: aspirational identity marketing. Brands don't sell products anymore. That's a 20th century model. They sell identities. They sell the version of yourself that you want to become, or more precisely, the version of yourself that the brand has convinced you that you should want to become. When you buy a certain watch, you're not buying a timekeeping device. You're buying membership in a category of person: successful, tasteful, arrived. When you buy a certain car, you're not buying transportation. You're buying a signal to the people around you and to yourself that you have achieved a level of life that warrants this car. When you buy a certain gym membership or protein powder or wellness product, you're not buying a service or a supplement. You're buying the identity of someone who takes themselves seriously. This is why luxury brands spend almost nothing on describing their products and almost everything on depicting the kind of person who uses them. They're not making an argument about quality. They're making an argument about who you are, or more precisely, who you are not yet but could be if you bought this. The gap they're selling you is the gap between your current self and your aspirational self, and they make sure that gap feels both urgent and bridgeable. Urgent enough that you feel it as a quiet discomfort, bridgeable enough that the product feels like a realistic step towards closing it. But the gap never actually closes, because the moment you purchase the identity signal, the brand has already moved it. The aspirational self is always one purchase ahead of you. That's not a design flaw, that is the design. Here is the second mechanism: manufactured scarcity and social proof. Your brain has a deeply wired response to two pieces of information. First, that something is rare or disappearing. Second, that other people want it or already have it. Both of these signals evolved as reliable indicators of value. If something is scarce, it's probably worth something. If other people want it, it's probably passed some social vetting process. Both are useful heuristics in a world of genuine scarcity and reliable social information. Brands have learned to manufacture both signals artificially and deploy them simultaneously for maximum effect. Limited time offer, only 3 left in stock, selling fast, 12 people are looking at this right now. These are not neutral informational disclosures, they are engineered urgency triggers. The item is not rare, the deadline is not real. The 12 people looking are a number generated to activate your loss aversion, not a live count of actual shoppers. But your brain doesn't know that. Your brain receives the scarcity signal and responds the way it evolved to respond, with urgency, with the fear of missing something valuable, with the impulse to act before the window closes. Layer social proof on top of that. 40,000 5-star reviews, as seen on, everyone is wearing this, best-selling. Your brain now has 2 independent signals pointing at the same conclusion. This thing has value, other people recognize it, and if you don't move quickly, you will be left out. The combination is nearly irresistible without conscious intervention, and the platforms delivering these signals have spent billions of dollars optimizing exactly how and when to deploy them for maximum conversion. You're not making a free choice when you respond to these triggers. You're executing a response that was engineered in advance.
Here is the third mechanism, the normalization of the luxury baseline. This one is slower and more insidious than the first two. It does not operate through a single moment of manufactured urgency. It operates through long-term, repeated exposure that gradually shifts what feels normal. 15 years ago, a kitchen renovation with quartz countertops and stainless steel appliances was aspirational. Today, it is the baseline expectation in any home listed above a certain price point. 15 years ago, a new iPhone every 2 years was a luxury. Today, not having a current generation smartphone feels like a social deficit. 15 years ago, international travel once a year was exceptional. Today, in certain social circles, it is the minimum credential for being considered someone who lives well. None of these shifts happened because the actual quality of life requires them. They happened because brands, media, and the aggregated effect of social comparison exposure gradually moved what counts as normal upward. The floor kept rising, and because the floor rose gradually, you barely noticed. You just found yourself needing more to feel like enough. This is the most expensive mechanism because it does not operate on individual purchases. It operates on your entire cost of living. It inflates the baseline of what a normal, acceptable, non-embarrassing life requires. And once a baseline is established, spending to maintain it does not feel like a choice. It feels like the minimum. Here is the fourth mechanism, the poverty signal and its exploitation. This one is the most direct and the least discussed. Certain brands have built their entire business model around making you feel that not owning it is a signal of financial failure. Not owning it means you cannot afford it, and cannot afford it means you are not doing well enough. This feeling, the fear of being read as struggling, is one of the most powerful purchase motivators in consumer psychology. Fast fashion brands cycle through trends so rapidly that wearing last season's silhouette becomes a visible marker. Luxury brands make their logos large enough to be read from across a room, turning their customers into billboards and everyone who is not a customer into someone who visibly lacks the billboard. Status symbols are carefully calibrated to be recognizable enough to signal membership, but expensive enough to exclude entry without significant financial strain. The game is specifically designed to make you spend money you may not have to avoid the social perception that you do not have money. Read that again. You are spending real financial resources to defend against the perception of a financial deficit. The brand profits from your insecurity. The insecurity was engineered by the brand to produce exactly this outcome. And the cruelest part is that the people you are trying to signal to are themselves spending money they may not have to signal to you. The entire performance is mutual and circular and benefits no one who is participating in it except the brands that sold all parties their props. Here is the fifth mechanism, algorithmic personalization and the invisible salesman. Every major platform you use is running a model of you. Not a rough sketch, a detailed behavioral profile built from thousands of data points. What you look at, how long you look at it, what you skip, what you return to, what you buy after seeing what you search for at what time of day, in what emotional state. This model is used to show you things, not things you asked to see. Things the model predicts will generate the maximum revenue from your specific psychological profile. If the model has determined that you respond to status anxiety, it will show you status anxiety content. If it is determined that you respond to fear of missing out, it will show you scarcity signals. If it is determined that you respond to social comparison triggers, your feed will be populated with exactly the comparison targets most likely to make you feel the gap and reach for the solution. You are not browsing. You are being profiled and targeted in real time by a system that is better at predicting your behavior than you are at predicting your own. The feeling that you stumbled across something is almost never true. You were walked to it through a sequence of exposures calibrated to your specific vulnerabilities. This is why willpower alone cannot protect you. You cannot out-discipline a system that knows your psychological architecture better than you do and is optimizing against you at machine speed. The defense is not stronger resistance. The defense is structural. Reduce exposure. Interrupt the pipeline. Understand what is being done so you can see it happening instead of experiencing it as spontaneous desire. Now let us talk about what you actually do with this information, because knowing the mechanisms is necessary but not sufficient. Understanding that you are being manipulated does not automatically make you immune to manipulation. The triggers are real. The psychological responses are real. Awareness helps, but it does not eliminate the response. The first structural defense is creating a gap between exposure and action. The algorithms want you to see and buy in the same session. The research is clear that purchase intent drops dramatically with time. A 12-hour gap between seeing something and being allowed to buy it eliminates the majority of impulse purchases. Not because you talked yourself out of it, because the engineered urgency has a short half-life, and the desire it manufactured evaporates when it is no longer being actively fed. The second structural defense is auditing your comparison inputs. Your comparison group is the single biggest determinant of how you feel about your financial life, not your actual financial situation, your reference group. People who earn less than you but compare themselves to lower reference groups feel wealthier than people who earn more but compare upward.
If your feeds are full of aspirational content, luxury signaling, and curated perfection, your baseline is being recalibrated against an artificial ceiling that will always make your reality feel insufficient. Curate deliberately. Your inputs are not neutral. They are actively psychologically working on you every time you consume them. The third structural defense is separating identity from purchase. Every time you feel the pull towards something, ask one question before anything else. What identity am I trying to buy here? What version of myself am I trying to signal or become through this purchase? Not to suppress the desire, just to name it clearly, because named desires can be evaluated. Unnamed desires just execute. When you can see that you are not buying a jacket, but buying the feeling of being the kind of person who can afford a certain jacket, you can ask whether the feeling is worth the price and whether there are other ways to access it. The fourth structural defense is understanding that the feeling of inadequacy is the product, not a side effect. The brands are not accidentally making you feel poor. They are deliberately manufacturing that feeling because it is the most reliable predictor of purchase behavior. When you feel it, you are not receiving information about your actual life. You are receiving a stimulus that was engineered to produce a specific behavioral response. You can feel it and name it as manufactured without acting on it. The feeling is not evidence, it is a trigger. You get to decide whether to pull it. The financial cost of not understanding this is not small. The average American household spends thousands of dollars annually on purchases driven primarily by social comparison and status anxiety, rather than genuine need or considered desire. That money does not buy satisfaction. Research on consumption and happiness is consistent on this point. Purchases made to close a social gap do not close the gap. They briefly relieve the anxiety while reinforcing the underlying belief that you are not enough without the right things around you, which makes you more susceptible to the next trigger, not less. The brands know this. The platforms know this. The entire machine is built on the fact that status anxiety cannot be permanently resolved through purchase. It can only be temporarily relieved. And temporary relief at a price is the most profitable business model in the history of commerce. You are not losing this game because you are weak or disciplined or financially irresponsible. You are losing it because you didn't know you were playing, and the other side has been playing for decades. Now you know the game. The question is what you do next.